My name is Ben Jutaro. I'm from Maduro. I enjoy it in Ahmadiyya, so may also use so we have some panelists here on the various different religions, and I'd like to introduce Mrs. Risha Patil. Okay. So Mrs. Patil, let's see here, was served at the Niagara Hospital, right? And she's, let's see here. Do I just read on this or?
Yeah, or maybe before that each presentation, you can maybe.
Oh, yeah, okay, so.
Okay. Down to your remarks. So.
Oh, yeah, sure, okay, sorry. So I'm a little rusty, so. And then we have Todd Schwartz, okay? And then we have Brian Tittle, okay, Tittle. And then we have, of course, the Imam. I just want to make sure I pronounce it. And then we have Nicholas Noblock. Right? Noblock. Noblock, okay, sorry. Okay. All right. So, we just go on with the program, right? So if I could start with Mrs. Patil, right? Yes. Oh, okay.
Namaste. My name is Kiran Datwani and I'm going to say a short summary of the Bhagavad Gita in Hindi. And the translation of it is on the screen. जो हुआ वह अच्छा हुआ, जो हो रहा है वह अच्छा हो रहा है, जो होगा वो भी अच्छा ही होगा। तुम्हारा क्या गया जो तुम रोते हो, तुम क्या लाए थे जो तुमने खो दिया, तुमने क्या पैदा किया जो नष्ट हो गया, तुमने जो लिया यहाँ से लिया, जो दिया यहाँ पर दिया, जब तुम्हारा है कल किसी और का होगा। परिवर्तन ही संसार का नियम है। जय हिंद। Thank you for listening to my short poem.
Oh, one more?
My sister is going to say a small speech about Hinduism. Namaste. Namaste. This is because the common religion of India is the bond of spiritual love and respect. The father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, said, Hinduism is the religion of pure truth and truth is love. So realize that. Even when we meet us, we are Christians. He also said, I am also a Muslim, a Christian, a Buddhist, and a Hindu. It means we all are equal and we all have equal rights. Gold is the main symbol of Hinduism and said to be the main spirit of God. Finally, to conclude, Hindus believe that all living religions are aspects of God, pure love, and life-deserving tolerance and understanding. Jai Hind.
Now here I am given a chance to speak about the founders of the Hinduism. Now Hinduism is difficult to speak about who founded. It's not founded by the human beings. It is an eternal belief, eternal law and eternal way and eternal people. Human beings have been living for time immemorial. We cannot count the history or we cannot say the number of years it has been practicing. Here I had to tell the beginning of the creation in a simple form. The cosmos is created by the will of God and operated, maintained. At the end of certain period, it's destroyed. So this has been continuing beyond. We say that this creation is 15 billion years, but before that, there was a creation before that. So this Hinduism has begun when the God created this universe, and his first disciple was the Sun God. Sun God, God knew that he looked around the creation, all the movable and immovable creatures came into existence, and God knows that all the creatures, movable, immovable, animals, fish, aquatic, human beings, they are all trapped in the illusion, Maya. So God wants to come back all these trapped souls back into Vaikuntha. That is why God gave us Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita means the song given by God for all the living beings to come back to Him. So if this Bhagavad Gita was discoursed, Shruti and Smriti, it was remembered, it was told, remembered and discoursed. So the disciple and teacher way, there was never a person coming and starting. It was a God from Sun God. Then the first human being who appeared, Manu, and from there it has been passed down from one generation to another generation by Shruti and Smriti, heard and discovered. Till 6,000 years ago, for the first time, Bhagavad Gita was put into Sanskrit script, written form. From then onwards, it has been practiced in a way, in an eternal way. Now, Hinduism is not a particular thing, it is an encompassment of, it has embraced all types of philosophies, thoughts, and way of living. So it looks very chaotic, differentiated from outside, but all come to one philosophy that we are all children of the God. So its truth have been divinely revealed and passed down to the ages to the present day in the most ancient world scripture called Veda. Now this Hinduism based on 4 principles. It's a way of living, all aspects of namely acquiring wealth, fulfillment, that's called artha, acquiring wealth, fulfillment of desires, satisfying our desires, and attaining the moksha in a very fundamental first truth of dharma, the way we should live. What is dharma? Dharma is righteousness, ethics. The foremost goal of the human being in Hinduism, the concept of dharma means we have to make how to live in this world, how to make the universe possible. It includes duties, rights, laws, virtues, and right way of living. All the Hindus, they're different. They may practice, they may speak different languages, they may different things. But all of you, under one umbrella of Dharma, they know how to live everyday life. So this Dharma includes religious duties, moral duties, and behavior. Now, all these people should accept and respect and live respect, harmony, and others in the world. Nothing is higher than Dharma. The weak can overcome the rich strong by speaking truth. So, pauper also can control the king, he can tell them what Dharma means. So, there is all are equal. if you follow the right path. Yes. Now, whatever I am saying is based on Bhagavad Gita. That's the founder of the religion, Hinduism. Now, second one is Artha, how to live. Means of living. Artha is the objective and virtuous pursuit of wealth for livelihood, obligation, economic prosperities. So it is inclusive of political life, diplomacy, material well-being, everything comes under this. So in this broad sector of Artha, all Hindus, how they are supposed to acquire wealth, how they are supposed to give out, what kind of path they will take, how they should achieve the financial security, all this comes under this. Then the third main pillar is Kama. Kama is sensual desires. So Kama is desires, wish, passion, longing, pleasure and the senses. And aesthetic enjoyment of life and affection and love. These are without sexual interest. In Hinduism, Kama is considered as essential and healthy goal of human life, but it should be under the umbrella of Dharma, Artha and Moksha. Kama cannot come out on its own. It has to be under this pillar. The last is Moksha, liberation, freedom of the soul. The Moksha concept is associated that we should get out of this illusion and go back to God. So here I will talk about the Bhagavad Gita principle. What happens in the beginning of the creation, God told the teacher, God told the first student that there are 5 things which are permanent in the universe. They are God, super soul, souls, individual souls. Here souls means everything has got a soul. Fish, animals, plants, flowers to human beings. Everything you see moving and mobile and not mobile, sleeping. Only dead things don't have soul. So God, soul and time. Time is ever since time is ticking. We may be 130 years, but it has been ticking before the destruction, before the creation of the universe, time was there. After the creation of the time, you are counting now, 2000, 3000, time has been going. So this is a permanent. Then, fourth thing is, time and karma. Karma is the action. Action is being, before the creation, there was the action of all the living beings. All of us have lived here before. Millions of times we have taken the lives. We are dead. Again we are born. Again, this happens to the animals, creatures, everyone. So the karma action has been, the karma cycle is continuing. And another fifth, the last one permanent thing is Prakriti. Prakriti is nature, visible or invisible universe. Universe is created, we can see what we see few stars. But beyond that thing we can see by telescope. Beyond that can be seen by something else. But beyond that, invisible universe also. So these 5 things are, according to God, beginning of the Hinduism, these 5 things are permanent. Permanent, everything comes, God creates the universe, maintains, then destroys. Then again, what happens is that when all this called cycle is called yuga. The cycle continuously comes, goes, goes. God wants all of us, including souls, come back to Him. And they mentioned, the Bhagavad Gita is mentioned, how to live, how to earn money, how to have the fulfillment of desires. Desires cannot be eradicated. Desires can be controlled because desire is important for the creation of the universe. If there is no desires, everything shuts down. But the desires should be monitored in three ways. Finally, those who do not want to be trapped in samsara, come back to me. Now God's place is not heaven because heaven has got the desires. People go to heaven to fulfill the desires. But according to the Hinduism, God's place is called Vaikuntha, where only those souls who have no desires want to be with the God, they go to Vaikuntha. As a result, Very few souls are liberated from this samsara cycle. Now here I come to the thing of soul. What is the soul? Everything has a soul. God has created according to Bhagavad Gita. Now I must tell you, nothing is my conclusion, nothing is my conclusion. Everything is said in Bhagavad Gita. I'm trying to translate to people to translate in English. According to Bhagavad Gita, God has created 8.5 million type of souls. Like human being is the one type. Okay, no Christian, Italian, Indian, Americans, they all come into one. Then apes, one category. There may be different. Lions, like that. There are 8.5 million Yonia means creatures. Multiplied by number of times, it will be trillions and trillions of virus to bacteria to everything has souls. So imagine among the souls floating in the air, souls living on the land, souls in the water, everywhere. Even the trees have the souls. So these all souls, this is a soul is a permanent thing. I am not the body. I am a soul inside, but I got to this body of Ushapati, this birth. Previous birth, I have lived millions of times. In the future, I am going to live millions of times. This is a conscient body I have got. So how to live in this life? For me, two things are there. Either to go up or go down. If I don't live according to the four principles, as it says, dharma, karma, and whatever, how to live, I will go down, down, down. If I give when I will try to fulfill my desires as a life, because our body is made up of 9 openings. From this opening, eyes, ears, and introductory organ, continuously the thoughts are coming in, so it creates a desire. The emotion, mind is can be friend, mind can be the enemy, that creates a desire in the body. So desire is not bad. God, Bhagavad Gita doesn't say that you should not have desire. The desire should be controlled. So, to control, we are trapped in the illusion. How to live? So that is why the meaning of soul, God says, soul has no birth, soul has no death. It is eternal like God. Soul cannot be cut into pieces by sword, soul cannot be burnt by fire, soul cannot be wet, make it wet, absorb water, soul cannot be dried by sand or heat. Soul is eternal. Now how does the soul get into the body? Once again, how the soul leaves the body? Now, animals also have the souls, they also, but that occurs in a certain order, predetermined order. When we get, why do we get the human body? We get the human body to get a chance, once in a million lives, to go back to God. To go back to Vaikuntha, to get liberated from the samsara, chakra of samsara. But instead of that, some of us, we fall into that temptation and sensuality. Come down. Some human being will go back down, become animal or something, and continue to be trapped in this illusion. Now, soul resides here in the center of this body, covered by 5 elements, 5 things, according to Bhagavad Gita. They are called as Pran, Apan, Vyan, Udan, and Saman. Its soul is floating within this 5 coverings, and the effect of the soul is spread throughout the body. Now, can we see it? Soul cannot be seen. Soul cannot be operated by human power. Well, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is explained. It is said, so our hair strand, if it is cut into millions of pieces, the size of the soul is that tiny. How many people can they see? Yes. But very, very people who are detached from the desires by the deep meditation, they only can see maybe 1 trillion lives in trillion years that people can see the soul. Most of us. We cannot. Now what happens? How do we get to the human body? What happens to the body during the death? In Bhagavad Gita it is said, we are covered, our soul is covered in the 5 elements, trapped in the 9 doors, and the mind is continuously fighting with the desires we try to fulfill, and we live according to our desires. I want to be rich, I want to build this thing, I want to earn money, I want to kill someone, we are hatred. Now, why do we behave? Some people are cruel, some people are nice, some people are virtuous. There are three important characters pervading the whole universe. In Bhagavad Gita it is said, they are Sattva, Rajo and Tamo. These three characters are permanently enveloped the whole of universe. America to all countries, even universe of the seven natures. What are these? Sattva nature, it is involving even animals and fish, human beings, all about this nature. Broad nature of three. Sattva is the virtuous, Rajo is a passion mixed with bit of virtuous quality, last is Tamo, is only passion. Passion is longing, desiring God. So some people who live in, who get sattva in their character, in their mind, in their emotion, they try to control the desires in that way that they achieve higher and higher. But in between, that's not permanent. We have to live the way the whole principle, which is a very good chance that we can fall down if we don't relate ourselves to God. Every day we have to pray. That is why we have got temples in the house, morning and evening, because we human beings are so wicked, weak, emotional. Our mind is not a friend, it's an enemy. With the desires coming, our body is made up of 24 elements. 24 elements are different, it's a long name. The body is made up of, soul is trapped in that. So, by connecting to the God, super God, we can control the passion, desires. Now, desires are so powerful that they can make us bad. Now, how can we control the desire? God, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, by simply thinking of God in your action. What you do, I may be soldier, I may be warrior, I may be priest, I may be cook, I may be servant, I may be nobody, I may be beggar, I may be anything. But firstly, I am not the body. I am the soul inside. I am not attached. I got this body because of my past deed. If I did good things of the past, I would have been born in a rich family or priestly family, a virtuous family. I don't have to struggle. But at present, I am fallen so low. I am down. Why? I am responsible for my past action. I need not. The only way of salvation is going back to remembering God and all the time, by thinking all the time, I am not the body. What does it mean? I am not forced to do anything. What I do, what is our sorrow, happiness, wealth, all are transient. It's not permanent. Why things are permanent? Soul, super soul, time, those are the permanent ours. So we should not fall for that momentary coming and destruction of the sorrow and happiness. So we should, the wise man, he will see the action in action and see the inaction in action. The wise man will see, wise man will not rejoice over the birth, not even a cry over the death, because there's only one semicolon of the sentence. We are after the death, we are born to get another body. Then again, we again try to put to the death. Again we'll die. Again we are born. It has been going on. So what happens when someone dies? When someone dies, when someone dies, as the soul leaves the body, in any of the 9 openings, it carries away the emotions what you have in your mind with the desires. Like the breeze carries the smell, same way the body, the soul when leaves the body, takes away these emotions, things trapped in your mind. That's the beginning of our next life. That's how. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. It's very difficult to think to say what is other design in Islam. This is the eternal religion has been living by the way we live, the way we control ourselves, all the time thinking. The most important thinking is I am not the body and I am not coming here with anything and I am going to leave this world with nothing. All that I have is soul, my soul, not the body, and the super soul, in connection to that thing. And I want to be liberated and go back to God. Thank you very much. There are few, just 2 minutes. Some pictures are there. Quickly let him show. It's only time. Then you give me a chance to ask questions. Quickly. Thank you very much. These are the temples. Quick, fast. Can you make it the video type fast? Fast. This is the temple where the communal people will go and pray. This is the temple sanctuary. We have temples in our house because it's a positive energy side. Now this is the community. This is the priest. Hindu priest looks like that. He does a meditation. This is the worshipping the river and taking bath. You see, climate change we talk. We are asked to pray the river because river is holy for us. This is river Ganges. This is the flowers we offer to the God that sustains the living of millions of people. And this is the flowers we make. Behind the religion, some 800 million people make a living out of it. They produce their food, they offer, they sell, and that's how this is the worshipping of river, Ganga river, Ganges, the holy river. Yes. This is how we do. This is the home prayer. We do it here in Marshall Island. This is what we give offering to the God. This is the elephant is very important. Those states in front of that. Everybody used to come and buy elephant. Yes. This is the temple. In temple, we have got all the architecture to show what happens in this life. If you don't put this around, the picture in the temples. This is the food. This is the story of Hinduism told by the form of dance to the small children in the schools. Yes. That's it. Thank you very much.
So do we field questions now or questions?
Are that we did it at the end of the session?
Okay, all right. Okay, our next presenter is Todd Stewart. Has obtained academic degrees which include BA from Pennsylvania State and MA from New Carolina State. Todd is also a U.S. Marine Corps war veteran. He teaches English to the high school students at co-op and Dev Ed English to the college students at CMI. Todd is a practitioner and instructor of yoga and meditation. Please welcome Todd.
There's a bit small point.
Oh yes, that's right. There's a small moment. And it's
Yeah, first order of line to your opponent, led by the
I'm Madonna O'Brien, and the poem that I'm going to recite today is called The Buddha's Last Instruction. It's by Mary Oliver. Make of yourself a light, said the Buddha, before we die. I think of this every morning as the east begins to tear off its many clouds of darkness, to send up the first signal, a white fan streaked with pink and violet, even green. An old man, he lay down between two salad trees, and he might have said anything, knowing it was his final hour. The light burns upward. It thickens and settles over the field. Around him, the villagers gathered and stretched forward to listen. Even before the sun itself hangs disattached in the blue air. I am touched everywhere by its ocean of yellow waves. No doubt he thought of everything that had happened in his difficult times. And then I feel the sun himself as he blazes over the hills like a million flowers on fire. Clearly, I'm not needed, yet I feel myself turning into something of inexplicable value. Slowly, beneath the branches, he raised his head. He looked into the faces of that frightened crowd. Thank you.
I don't think I need that. I'm loud enough. Thank you once again, Valerie, for reading that poem. And thank you, Michelle, for your presentation as well. I feel like a very inadequate messenger for what some of the things that I feel drawn to say today. And so I thank you for letting me stand here at the podium and hold your ear for a few moments. I have a timepiece that I will use and do my best to keep this procedure on schedule. Religion. Religion is very much inseparable from culture. Religion and culture go hand in hand. If you take one away from the other, neither is what they are. And so, I will come back to that. But with the introduction we have an idea of the world that the last birth of the Buddha occurred in India around 566 BCE. At that time, we have all of the religious practices going on that were just explained to us. Very rich in religious culture was India at this time. Buddha was born Siddhartha, born a prince, born in an incredibly wealthy family, to a king. At the time of his birth, the wise men came to see the Buddha, and at that time determined that he would be, or is becoming, the next rebirth of the Buddha. The Buddha is a concept. The last rebirth occurred approximately 2,500 years ago. The poem that we heard by Adelia, oh, those lines strike me so hard every time. Clearly I'm not necessary, but I find myself turning into something of inexplicable value. The process of becoming, change and becoming. That's what the Buddha brings to us. So the Buddha was born into this very lavish lifestyle. As soon as his father had heard the wise men say that your son will be the Buddha, as a king, a man with many earthly pleasures, he did not want that life for his son. He wanted his son to just grow up to receive the riches of royalty and receive all the bounty that his son thought deserved. And so, he did his best to he turned to his wife, Princess Maya, or Queen Maya, and said, I will do everything I can to shelter my son. They found the most beautiful woman within the city walls, married him to her at the age of 16, and in India, there are only 3 seasons, primarily. And for all of these 3 seasons, he built 3 separate palaces for Siddhartha and his new wife. And they had every material pleasure that could be imagined. Soon Siddhartha got bored. So, against his father's advice, he wanted to see what the world was like on the outside of the walls. It is said that he made 4 notable trips. The first time he went outside the walls, he saw sickness. It affected him greatly. Not something that he had seen in his life of lavish materialism. On his second trip, he saw old age. This affected him greatly. Not that it wasn't there within the walls, but he was removed from it. So this had a big impact on him. The third time he went out, he noticed most death and decay. And this too affected him very much. Building upon each other. And then the fourth notable time, he saw a wandering monk. He said, that is what I'm going to do. And so, I have this factually incorrect, I'm sure, but around the age of 20, the Buddha is said to have left the palace walls, renounced all of his materialism, shave his head, leave his clothes behind, wear a robe, no money, no jewels, no food, begging for food, wandering to find teachers, which there were many in India at the time, all throughout India. The Buddha went to many, many teachers and studied under many different teachers for very long periods of time. There are 8 jhanas, do I have this correct? Is this something that is within Hinduism as well? There are 8 jhanas that a spirit inside of a body can reach that brings you to a higher idea of existence, if you will. Very quickly, the Buddha attained all 8 and would have, by all rights and means, have already been revered as a deity. But he did not eradicate those 4 causes that he saw. He saw sickness that happened to even the greatest of the enlightened ones. He saw the old age. He saw the death. And he learned from the monks the idea of rebirth and dependent origination. If I have time, I will go into that. But I'm going to touch on it. And so the Buddha was not satisfied. He received the highest teachings of any teacher in India at that time, and he said, "This does not eradicate suffering. I am not satisfied." So then the Buddha went off on his own. And for 6 years, he is said to have practiced severe asceticism. Asceticism is basically extreme physical punishment of the self. He starved himself. He put himself in bonds. He wouldn't sleep. Any physical necessities that we think we might have, the Buddha walked away from. And he thought perhaps this was the way to end all suffering and to be free of the chains of this world. And then he found that that was not true either. He said, and then he came to one of his grand revelations where he saw that his life of extreme pleasures and luxuries would not eradicate the suffering. He also saw and experienced firsthand that his life of extreme poverty and asceticism and renunciation of everything physical would not bring him to the end of suffering. And so he came to the point to understand the middle path and the middle way, which again, I will speak more of if I have time. So with this, he began to go out on his own and meditate. Meditating beyond the 8 jhanas. Now when we're talking about beyond in a meditation sense, we're also talking about as far as you go beyond, that's as deep as you're going within. The Buddha continually looked inside. He knew that the answers were all within. And so he kept on getting to a deeper level, and a deeper level, and a deeper level. And finally, he became determined and disciplined enough that he said, I don't care what occurs to me, this evening I'm going to sit underneath this Bodhi tree until I become enlightened. It is not said specifically for how long the Buddha sat there underneath that tree, but His enlightenment is said to have occurred underneath of a full moon, at which time he finally found the cause of suffering, and he eradicated it from himself. And when I've gone and I've heard these words in Pali language, which was the language of the Buddha at the time, it's so beautiful, and I sure have not memorized it, and I would botch it up if I tried to pronounce it. But he speaks about, he's talking to the house builder, the great physical house builder. He said, "Oh, house builder, I have lived many, many lives, and I've lived many, many lives. I'm seeming to live many, many, many lives more. But I have taken that away from you now. I have removed all of your bricks. I have removed all the mortar. You have nothing more to build my house with. Now I am free." This occurred at age 35. The Buddha is said to have lived a long, strong life until the age of 80. So for the next 45 years, the Buddha walked throughout India teaching his methodology of meditation so that people could receive this same enlightenment and freedom from suffering. It had been asked of Buddha at the time, what is the chronological origin of suffering? His answer was, that is not what I'm here to answer. This is not something that the Buddha speaks of. He says, I am here to define the cause of what suffering is in life and to show you a way out. It has to do with a theory of what is called dependent origination. Very long, it's not complex. I'm going to work backwards from it, because the backwards way is what he taught as the way of liberation. Cutting the chains until finally the last knot is cut and you're free of the bondage of that rope of physicality. So we have, in our birth, we have decay, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair, all of our suffering. It's in the seed of our birth. If we're born, we will experience all of these things, every single one of us, and we will suffer continually. There's no way out of it. Birth is conditioned by a process of becoming. This process of becoming is conditioned by a clinging and a craving and this desire. This clinging and this desire are all caused by sensations, literal, physical sensations. This sensation is caused by our sense organs. Our eyes, our nose, our ears, our taste, our skin, our skin organ, our touch, and our thoughts. And our thoughts. They're all sensations. These sensations come about through mental and physical phenomena, things that occur in the world. These phenomena occur through consciousness itself. Consciousness itself occurs from an act of the will, what you hear as free will, volition. Volition, personal volition creates consciousness. And the Buddha says it is nothing but our own ignorance that causes our volition, our free will. Because if we could see this dependent origination in its totality, the wheel, the spokes are the physical, mental sensations and faculties, but they're not real. It's the hub in the center that has no spatial existence, that is the everything in the middle of this, what people are calling Buddhism. In the middle is the truth. This endless wheel, this endless cycle of becoming starts through ignorance of the entire process. And the methodology of the Buddha was to get rid of suffering through eradicating ignorance. And the way that he did that was to teach. Not how to go to a teacher, not how to find somebody, not the truth is important. How to go and find the truth within yourself. These are the concepts of the Buddha. This is why. Also notable, before I move on, it was said that 2,500 years after the incarnation of the last Buddha, incarnation is not a term used by the Buddha. He would call it rebirth. I don't need to go into why that is. If you want to speak about that, I can speak at length on many different things. I only have 2 minutes. But it is said, it has been prophesied, that 2,500 years after the appearance of the last Buddha, the next Buddha would reappear. And not as one person, but many, and all throughout the earth. This is now. This is very important. But there are some things that I feel are way more important than anything that I just said that I need to speak about before I leave this topic. Religion and culture tied together, the same thing. 2 pieces of the same thing. Heads and tails of the same coin here, people. If you divorce a culture from its religion, the culture can't exist as a culture anymore. If you divorce a religion from the cultural background from where it comes, it's not what it was. It's something different. When you take a religion and remove it from the time, geographic region, and peoples who practiced it, it is nothing like it was. It is not the same thing. It's not even close. It's very confusing to me how we can call these things by the same name. Beyond that, or very much tied to it perhaps, all of the founders of these religions, and just as I find it very difficult to speak of the founder of Buddhism because the Buddha didn't find Buddhism. He spoke against anything that would be seen as Buddhism, as any ism. He spoke against ritual. He spoke against organized ways of doing things. He said, sit and find the truth yourself. He said, follow me if it works for you. These are the things he is said to have said. For the Buddha would not be Buddhist today. I think you would agree, Jesus wouldn't be Christian. Maybe, I don't know, but I have a strong inclination that Muhammad wouldn't be Muslim. I think maybe he would be Mohammedan for various reasons. But these founders wouldn't be part of what we're calling their religions. Beyond that, these concepts are universal concepts, and we're trying to specify them into a region, into an organized ideology. And they're very specific. I'm understanding that. I know. I'm sorry. But I feel like I got 5 more minutes because I got 5 minutes stolen from me. I have much reason to. I don't want to offend anybody. I want to speak some of the truth, though. What I feel is the truth because I think it is important. And I do not, good God, if you walk out of here believing me, you are less intelligent than when you walked in here. I do want you to hear me, but I want you to find the truth within yourself and consider what I'm saying. These founders, there's strong evidence to believe that they weren't people. They weren't human beings. They're stories based upon beautiful divine concepts. They're very valid. They were not human entities in a historical sense on earth. Beyond that, all of these stories, all of these concepts came from the original humans on the planet that had a thriving civilization for tens of thousands of years in Kemet, in what we call Africa today. And none of these religions recognize that, and it hurts me very bad. Especially when I see people of very obvious Pan-African descendancy in the diaspora, yet not recognizing where their humanity comes from. All of these metaphors and stories and religious ideas come from Africa, from tens of thousands of, perhaps hundreds of thousands of years ago. If we're going to speak of our religious founders, we're talking about history. And if we're going to talk about history, let's look at what history really is. We call history what's written down, and everything that wasn't written down in word is prehistory. Okay? Prehistory is just as, if not more, valid. We need to go before the writing. And this information is available if you look for it. Very readily available in our time of information these days. So I have to say, Matthew, on the back of this pamphlet, there is a very beautiful quote. But if you turn to it, it says, about the third or fourth sentence down, it says, this is illustrated by the fact that all the potentials and capabilities which have been granted to the Aryans have also been granted to the races inhabiting Arabia, Persia, Syria, China, Japan, Europe, and America. Where is Africa? If we're going to talk about the founders, let's look at the founders of our humanity, what brought us to this earth in the first place. If you look at all the statues of the Buddha all over the world, what do you see? You see a man with a very big nose and naughty hair. Where do you think those people came from? I want you to walk out of here with very serious questions. I want you to go within yourself and find these answers. Thank you for your time.
Alright, so I'll be reading from 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clinking cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers, and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith, as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful, or arrogant, or rude. It does not insist home quake, it is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends, but as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to my childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, that when I know fully, even as I have known, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love.
Thank you, Mr. Chitaro, and good afternoon to all my fellow speakers and all of the guests gathered here. I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks for the invitation to speak at this, the first of hopefully many interfaith dialogues here in the Republic of the Marshall Islands. I'm happy to share this important aspect of my own faith and to sit and learn from the other faiths represented in this conference. As Pope Francis says, Jesus' example encourages us to seek a serene encounter with others, to understand one another, and to grow in charity and truth. We need to pause, to accept, and listen to one another. I also must admit that I stand before you with no small amount of trepidation. After all, there are around 2.4 billion Christians in the world today, as of my check of Wikipedia this morning. That number was correct. And I am just one person. Christianity is a large and complicated family, ranging from the Catholic Church to the Eastern Orthodox churches to the Protestant denominations and beyond. Here in the Marshall Islands, we have some experience with large, complicated, extended families. And as with any large family, we Christians can be fractious and argumentative. However, just like with any large family, I believe there is much more that unites us than there is that divides us. Most important of these things that unite us all is the person at the center of our shared religion, an itinerant desert preacher named Jesus, called Christ, and the core tenets of that man's teaching. During his ministry, while he was walking with his friends to a town in Galilee, Jesus paused to ask his disciples, "Who do people say I am?" In answer, the disciples offered John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets. These would have all been reasonable answers at the time. During his ministry, Jesus traveled from town to town in Judea, much like the prophets in the Old Testament. However, Jesus pressed further, asking his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" So, who was he? Jesus was an itinerant preacher from a backwater town of a backwater province of the Roman Empire. However, he was also much more than that. At the center of most Christian beliefs is the idea that Jesus was both fully God and fully man. This mystery lies at the heart of understanding Jesus. But it's confusing, and I'll be the first to admit that. What does it mean to be both fully God and fully man? To begin to answer this question, it's important to note that Jesus of Nazareth, the preacher in first century Palestine, was not God pretending to be human. Though we may not have much immediately in common besides the fact that he probably also had a beard, Jesus was a flesh and blood, real life, honest to God-man, much like me or anyone else in this audience. He experienced everything that human beings do. He was born, lived, and died, just like all of us will. When he came into this world, he was just as dependent on his parents as we were. He nursed, he burped, he needed to be changed. As a child, he played games with his friends, he bumped into things, he skinned his knee, he ate, he drank, he slept, he felt joy and sadness, he felt tired, he pulled muscles, he sneezed, he sweated, and probably when he was delivering his messages in front of large crowds of people like this one, he probably felt nervous, just like I do. Jesus was a preacher who taught in parables, a man who could gather crowds and address them with messages that were immediately relevant to their lives. He answered their questions, he walked among them, he shared his life with his followers. Jesus, the man, was a teacher. And this humanity of Jesus can be something of a stumbling block for many people. But it is a critical part of understanding the central mystery of Jesus Christ and answering the question that he asked his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" Throughout their time together, the disciples had seen Jesus in human moments. For example, in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus encounters a Gentile woman, a woman who was not Jewish, not from his culture. And she asked Jesus to heal her daughter. And Jesus refuses. But the woman persists. And after she responds to him, we see Jesus soften and he heals her daughter. This story shows us that Jesus was a man who learned and interacted with people in authentic and deeply human ways. I'm sure all of us here have put off something that someone's asked us to do because we felt tired. Jesus was a man, and sometimes he did that too. But there is another part of that story, just like there is another part to Jesus, a healing. Remember that Jesus was both fully human and fully divine. He was not just a preacher, a teacher, a carpenter with a gift for clever parables and fables. When Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do you say I am?" eventually Peter, the man who would go on, some say, to found the church, responded, "You are the Messiah." The Gospels are full of accounts of Jesus using that divine power to heal the sick, calm storms, and even raise the dead. Things that all of us, no matter how hard we might try, may have trouble doing. The opening of the Gospel of John offers the following with regards to Jesus' divinity. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. Later, John remarks, "For God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." Jesus was the Christ, the anointed one, God on earth, sent to save. And this divinity, too, can be challenging for some people. Jesus, the teacher, is something that many people can respect. Many people throughout history have taken the teachings of Jesus the man and left out the actions and the purpose of Jesus the divine. But both aspects of Jesus are inextricably linked. Jesus the carpenter must be considered with Christ the teacher and the Savior. He is these two things at all times. He was divine when he sweated in the little shop building furniture, and he was human when he raised a man from the dead. The duality of these two aspects is central to the Jesus who lays the foundation for Christian belief. To consider one without the other is a mistake. It makes God small when God is anything but small. So what is that foundation that Jesus laid for Christians? I chose to open my time with a recitation of Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. Not only because it is one of my, if not my absolute favorite passages from the Bible, but because it says in 300 words more than I could have said in 3 million. Paul writes to us about love. Love and its importance is also prominent in the first letter of John. In St. John's letter, chapter 4, verses 7 to 9, Jesus informs us, "Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. And God's love is revealed among us in this way. God sent his only Son into the world so that we may live through him. We know that God is love and that Jesus is a revelation of God's love." Faith, hope, and love. These threads weave their way throughout the entirety of Jesus' ministry on earth. Through his example, Jesus Christ teaches us what each of these three virtues mean and how we can practice them in our lives. The first of these three mentioned by Paul is faith. Faith is a belief and a trust in something that we cannot see or prove. Through his example, Christ asks us to have faith in God. There is a story, one of the few that is present in all of the Synoptic Gospels, of Jesus and his disciples taking a boat across the Sea of Galilee, an inland sea that is about half the size of Madra's Lagoon. As Jesus and his disciples crossed the sea, a storm rose up around them. The disciples were terrified, but they noticed that something was missing. Jesus was apparently so unconcerned by the storm and the danger of their ocean passage that he was asleep in the back of the boat. The disciples woke him up, and rising to meet the storm, Jesus commanded it to settle, and the storm settled. When the storm had died down, Jesus turned to his disciples and said, "Why are you afraid? How is it that you still have no faith?" Later on in the Gospel, Jesus shows us what faith means again at the Sea of Galilee. In this instance, his disciples were alone on the boat, and again, they were being tossed by the waves of a storm. As they were offshore, Jesus walked out to them. Nearing the boat, Jesus tells his disciples, again, "Do not be afraid." Peter, one of his disciples, asks him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus answers him with, "Come." And Peter begins to walk out onto the water. But distracted by the danger of the storm, Peter falters, fears, and cries out, "Lord, save me." So Jesus reaches out his hand and pulls Peter to safety. His response, perhaps jokingly to Peter, was, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" And with this story, it teaches us a little bit more than just don't get on boats with the disciples because it's likely that there's going to be a storm. It also teaches us about faith. With his words, "Do not be afraid," Jesus shows us what that faith means. There are many more examples scattered throughout the gospel, but I've noticed that after my time is up, we will be able to get refreshments, so I will not go over time in order to mention them all. Suffice it to say, Jesus is a calm within the storm. And this may be a literal storm surrounding us and tossing us around in the lagoon. Or it might be a storm in our own mind, storms that ask us, how will we be able to meet our obligations? Will I finish my project at work? What have I gotten myself into by agreeing to speak at an interfaith conference? Through all of these, Jesus offers the same simple command: do not be afraid, come to me. The second of the virtues mentioned by Paul in this letter is hope. As Jesus' teaching of faith relied on his magisterial power in calming storms, his teaching of hope relies on his deep sense of humanity. One thing that I believe is of paramount importance to understand about Jesus is that he was something of a rule breaker and a rebel. He resided on the fringes of society. His friends and confidants were not well-heeled businessmen in comfortable suits and positions of power. He kept his company with outcasts, lepers, poors, and even the dreaded tax collectors. These people were dirt. They were not considered fully human. They had no place in the society of Jesus' time. Yet it was with these same people that Jesus chose to stay and teach. He offered them hope both of forgiveness and hope for society that may one day recognize them as fully human One particularly powerful example of this lies again in the Gospel of John. As Jesus was teaching in the temple, members of the religious judiciary brought to him a woman who had committed adultery. They asked him, "Now in the law of Moses, we are commanded to stone such women. And what do you say?" Jesus simply responded by bending over and writing with his finger in the ground. When they kept on questioning him, "What do you say? What do you say we should do with this adulterous woman?" he straightened up and he said to them, "Let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And once again he bent down and continued writing on the ground the sins of all of the men who wished to stone this woman. When they saw these, they went away one by one, until Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. He straightened and said to her, "Women, where did they go? Has no one stayed to condemn you?" And she said, "No one, sir." Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go your way, and from now on, do not sin again." This is a powerful message. By every right of their laws, the men would have been justified in stoning the woman. But instead of that combination, instead of following that rule, Jesus offered her forgiveness, and with that forgiveness, a certain kind of hope. The hope that we're all offered, because all of us, each of us, are sinners in some way. Whatever code we live by, there are times when each of us are led astray and we fail to live up to the standards we set for ourselves. When we come to Jesus, we find the same message he offered to the woman. "I do not condemn you. Go your way, and do not sin again." And finally, in closing, we come to love, the greatest of all truth. As John writes, God is love, and the qualities that Paul writes about are found in God. Love is kind. It is not envious or boastful or arrogant. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Jesus came to us to be a witness and an example of this love. It is my understanding that fundamentally most religions grapple with a separation of some sort. It may be our separation from the super soul, if I'm correct. It may be our separation from an ideal, some kind of thing that prevents us from being one in something higher than us. And we have that in Christianity as well. And that is the love that Jesus offers us. A chance to the end of our lives to become one with the Father, with the God the Father. He says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me." In accepting Jesus and turning to that love, we have our chance to become one with God the Father at the end of our lives. And that's a powerful sort of love, a redeeming love. And one that I think we as Christians still try and struggle to understand what makes us deserving of it and what allows us to partake in that love. So we return again, I guess, to that mystery at the center of this. How can someone be both fully God and fully man? And what sort of sacrifice did God the Father make in sending his Son down to be with us? And unfortunately, for a neat resolution, I don't know. It's a mystery. And part of being Christian is being comfortable with not always knowing the answers and realizing that there are mysteries that lie in the heart of your faith. That's the one that lies in the heart of ours. And there may be other mysteries that are other things that we'll hear about later today. But we are left with those words, that there are three virtues that remain: faith, hope, and love. And Paul tells us the greatest of these is love. So from one person who is one of 2.4 million, and who is just one fully man, 0% God. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak to you today on this. And please If we learn anything from this today, I think it's our shared religious convictions that love for all and hatred for none is the greatest of all these things. Thank you.
Ikadaraman ko, ay po yung extended sa mga kanto. Talimig po yung anak, talimig yung ilalim yung mga lupit. Kaya wad dito, talimig hidrap ko ay lupit. Okay, pero kaya ay tuba, panayan ni I go into it. You don't know you don't know what he said. Someone you don't know what he said. Or not, I need to go. So wait, and it's the one you buy the one. You want to really then don't put me out of it. You put one another, you go there. When one another are the party. I don't know. Narameo, alameo ay naram ilogong yung pareho. O alam, dito ko kadaraman ko ang gana niya ilogong pareho ilogong.
Assalamualaikum. Asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la syarika lah wa asyhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'du, a'udzu billahi minasy syaithanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wa ma arsalnaka illa rahmatan lil alamin. So first of all, I would like to thank all of you guys for coming and joining us this afternoon. As well as I would like to say a big thank you to my fellow speakers and Ben for accepting our invitation to come and present their point of view. To start off with, I have just recited a small portion of the Holy Quran. Holy Quran is the Muslim holy book, which is a word-by-word revelation of God the Almighty and Prophet Muhammad. He may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. I have divided my presentation with, just like my fellow speakers, I also had to cut a lot of material down and try to make it as much simple as possible. I have basically cut my presentation into 3 parts. First part is about the early life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, from his birth all the way to age of 40. And from 40, when he received his first revelation, that's part 2 of my presentation. And then the migration, which I will explain later. These are 3 parts to my presentation. Condition of Arabia at the time of the birth of the Prophet, peace and blessings of God be upon him. Slavery was very common. Women's rights was a big issue. Women were treated they didn't have any standard or any status in the society. Similarly, poor and orphans were always oppressed. Drinking was a big issue, gambling, tribal war, and the whole world in general and the Arabian in particular was going through this extreme spiritual as well as moral decline. So this was the time of 570, around that time, common era, when Prophet Muhammad peace be upon him was born. If you guys can just follow me on my slide. So, where I think family and birth of the Prophet. Holy Prophet was born in the city called Mecca. Mecca was the principal town of the Arabia of that time. People from all over Arabia would come and perform pilgrimage there. Holy Prophet belonged to the tribe called Quraysh, and the Qurayshites, as well as many other Arabs, attributed themselves to be the descendants of Prophet Abraham, who was believed to have come to Mecca with his son Ishmael and his wife Hagar, some 2,600 years before the birth of the Prophet. Before the birth of the Holy Prophet, his mother saw in a vision in which an angel was commanding her to name the newborn as Muhammad. So the name itself was a revealed name. And his mother, Amina, also saw a vision that a glittering light is emitting from her and covering all of the world. Then the guardianship. Holy Prophet ﷺ was born in August 570, Common Era. His father, Hazrat Abdullah, had passed away when he was, even before his birth. So he was literally born as an orphan. His mother also passed away when he was about 6 years of age. Then his guardianship was handed over to his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib. Hazrat Abdul Muttalib also passed away when Holy Prophet was 8 years old. Then Holy Prophet's guardianship was handed over to his uncle, Hazrat Abu Talib, who lived until he attained the age of prophethood. Youth of the Prophet. As he grew up, there were certain qualities, characteristics which were very unique and were associated with the Prophet, which were not found common in any other man. He quickly attained a title of a Siddiq and Alamin. In Arab, they would generally call people or associate them with the qualities that that person had. So Holy Prophet, as he grew up, and he was called Alamin, meaning he is the most trustworthy, and then a Siddiq, that is the most truthful. And this was very common to all of the people that this was his name. The Holy Prophet also, as he grew up as a young man, he minded his own business, did not participate in any quarrels or any fights. But if there is someone who was being oppressed and he came to for help, then Holy Prophet was part of this commission or this committee, which was called the Hudud, and this was to protect the rights of the oppressed people. He got married at the age of 25 to a woman called Khadija. Khadija was a rich businesswoman, and she was widowed twice, and she was of the age of 40 at that time. During his, after he entered into 30s, he started realizing that just like a Buddhist speaker was telling that there is more to life, and he was not satisfied with what was going around. He did not like how women were treated, how slaves were treated, how people were oppressed. So he started going to an outer, there was a mountain called Hira, and there was a small cave in that mountain. So he would go there, take certain provisions with him, spend a number of days, and then he would come back, get more provisions, and just meditate there. So this was his routine in his 30s, and it remained for a long time until he attained the age of 40. If you could see the screen behind me, can you go to the part 2 screen? Yeah, keep on going, please. Yeah, this one. This is that mount where Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, would go for meditation, for worshiping one God. So now I'm entering part 2 of my presentation. In part 2, it is about the first revelation and how his message was accepted by the masses. The first revelation is believed to have been taking place in 610 when he was 40 years of age. His experience in the same cave of the Mount Hira, the mount that he was in, that mountain, as he was worshiping and as he was meditating, he saw an angel in a vision who has come to him and has asked him to read Iqra. And Holy Prophet replies that I do not know how to read, Ma ana bikari. And upon this, angel asked him again twice. He replied the same. And it is written that on the third time, the angel held him very strongly and said, read Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord who has created you. And then this is the actual verse which was revealed in that. This was the very first revelation, and therefore this was the start of his prophethood. Upon this experience, he went back. He was afraid of the responsibility which was being put on his shoulders, as a prophet, as the divine leader of such morally declined society. And he was not sure whether he would even be able to handle that, that burden. So he goes to his house and he tells his wife to cover him because he was shivering, and he says that I'm afraid that that if I will not be able to carry this responsibility. And the testimony that his wife gave was something which is to be highlighted, because she had married the Holy Prophet for 15 years, and a person can hide anything or almost everything from other people, but a wife is someone that a person lives with, and she knows all of your secrets, all the weaknesses that a person may have. So her testimony plays a very crucial role. She accepted right away, and she says that, how can God forsake you? You always help the poor and bear their burden. You are considerate and kind to the relations. You're taking care of orphans and freeing the slaves. How can God forsake you? So this was the testimony of Hazrat Khadija as soon as the first experience or the first revelation had taken place. And Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, was himself confused that whether he would be able to bear this, this burden of such a great responsibility. This was therefore his wife Khadija took Holy Prophet to her cousin to get some more information. The cousin, his name was Waraka bin Nawfal. He was a Christian by faith, and he had studied, he knew the biblical language and as well as Arabic. So the Holy Prophet narrated his experience to Waraka bin Nawfal, and he says that this is the same angel Gabriel, who had descended upon Moses and who had descended upon you. And I wish I was strong enough, and I wish I am alive when your people will expel you from the city, so that I can be your help and support. Upon this, the Prophet looks at Waraka with a strange impression and says that, will my people ever expel me from my own city? And we'll find later on how he was expelled. So now the preaching of the message begins. What was the message? That is the important question. I have highlighted and underlined only one God, right? The God of Abraham. So he preached that we should worship only one God, who was the God of Abraham and who was the God of all other prophets. Because at that time, Meccans had made as many as 360 some gods in the Kaaba, in the house where it was built by the Prophet Abraham. So this was something, they were okay with the rest of the stuff, but this thing was something which sort of affected their economy. They had a lot of pilgrims that would come, and so this is the main reason why Muslims were persecuted. Other stuff, freeing of the slaves, rights of the women, rights of the orphans, these were some of the other stuff which he was preaching in the society, which the rich people did not like, because it was going against their interests. Then the persecution began in the beginning because the message was more towards rights of the poor, rights of the needy, the slaves. In the beginning, there were poor people who accepted and who joined Islam, but gradually there was more acceptance from people who were strong, who were financially, physically, they belonged to honorable families. So as the acceptance of the message increased, so did the persecution. They first took it lightly. Later on, they started stopping them physically. And then the time came when they started killing Muslims. Now, what I want to highlight is that at that time, throughout this whole time period, Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, did not tell his followers to retaliate or to defend or go on war or fight. So if Islam was a religion of violence, God forbid, then we should have seen it from day one. But we see Holy Prophet is already in his 50s, and he's always telling his followers to be patient, to show patience is a virtue. And when the So now the time comes when the lives of Muslims are endangered. So upon this, he tells his followers to just migrate to Abyssinia. You know, we have 2 Abyssinians here in the crowd, and I'm always pleased to meet them because these were the people on whose land very first migration took place of Muslims. And the king of that, the Najashi, he was a Christian king, and he protected them and gave them protection. So now the next slide, please. Alive or dead, 100 red camels. So this is about 13 years down his ministry or his prophethood, when the Arab chiefs have decided that now enough is enough, and we have to do something about Muhammad, peace be upon him, so he can stop his message. So they have offered, they have a meeting in which the chiefs decide that they should announce whoever brings Muhammad dead or alive, they will get 100 camels. And 100 camels at that time was supposed to be the most expensive sort of source of transportation. We could consider it like a Ferrari of today, or a Lamborghini. So this was offered. As soon as this was proposed, Prophet Muhammad again migrated. So he did not retaliate. He did not, did any kind of rebellion or anything like that. And he simply migrated. So the next slide is the migrations. And I'm already almost over my time. So as soon as he goes to Medina, this is when he starts to gets together. There are 3 societies in Medina. Medina was another place where about a couple of 100 miles from Mecca. This is where Holy Prophet migrated. And there were Jews living there, there were pagans, and then there was a small community of Muslims there as well. So all of them together signed this pact in which they made Prophet Muhammad as their chief. And now Holy Prophet was the head of the state of this small town. In these days that we're talking about, there was no unified country in the Arabia, especially. Every town or every region was ruled by chiefs or kings. Just like over here, there's a road system or a major road. So just like that, so unanimously, Meccans, Madanites, they accept Prophet Muhammad as their president, as their ruler, or as their governor. Then we go to the next. Now, I just want to pause there for a minute, and I want you guys to just reflect back. It has been about 13 years into his prophethood. He had lived there, and his followers have been brutally martyred in very brutal ways. I wish I had time, but I'm running out of on time. But the way they treated Muslims, Holy Prophet's own daughter was stabbed, and eventually she passed away, and so many other brutalities that they had committed. Throughout this time, Prophet taught patience and do not retaliate. Now he has moved to another place where he is head of the state, and over here as well, Meccans did not stop pursuing him. So they prepared another army of 1,100 people, and they have decided to attack Mecca. So the question is, what was the options that Prophet Muhammad had? Either he would surrender and they would just take all the women as their slaves and they could kill all the men. This was the norm of the time. So this is the time when God the Almighty has revealed to Prophet Muhammad. And this verse that I have over here, verse number 22, verse number 40 of chapter 22 of the Holy Quran, this is where the permission to fight is given to Muslims to self-defend. So, and you will see, I would like to read this. God the Almighty says, permission to fight is given to those against whom war is made, because they have been wrong, and Allah indeed has power to help them. Those who have been driven away from their homes unjustly, only because they said, our Lord is Allah. And if Allah did not repel some men by means of others, there will surely have been pulled down cloisters and churches and synagogues and the mosques. So the very reason why the permission to defend that was given after the 15 years into his prophethood was for self-defense. So were wars fought by the prophet? Yes. But they were in self-defense. They were not in offense. They were only to protect Islam. And as you could see that God says that if God had not allowed this, then the synagogues and the churches and other worship places would have been brought down. So the very reason why they were allowed to defend themselves was so for the freedom of religion. And this is the reason why there were several battles that were fought in self-defense by Prophet Muhammad and his people. And then we see there's the truce of Hudaybiyah, there's an agreement by Meccans after a few years in the 6th year of his hijrah, where both parties, the Meccans and Prophet Muhammad, they find an agreement party, and that they will not attack each other, they will live in peace. And within 2-3 years, because now the Muslims got this a peaceful time to preach peacefully, the message of Islam spread throughout Arabia, and towards the end, after a few years, 2 years later, the truce, which was signed by the Meccans, was breached, and therefore Prophet Muhammad came with 10,000 of his companions into Mecca. He had no choice but to come in. Mecca surrendered, and this was the time when Prophet Muhammad was the governor. He could have taken revenge rightfully, because in the Mecca, the people who had just surrendered were people who killed his uncle, his daughter, many other Muslims, to expel them from the city, took over their properties. Holy Prophet, if he had wanted, now he was the governor of the state, and he could have revenged or taken justice from them. But guess what he did? He says, La tasrib alaykum al-yawm, that today there shall be no blame that lies upon you this day. And he forgave all of them. So, this is an example which is set by Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, that having the power to take the revenge, but still he decides to forgive them. So that's pretty much concludes. He died in the 11th year of Hijrah on June 8, 632, Common Year in Medina. Thank you.
Okay, this thing that I wrote is called Kathleen. Here's a typical little story. I'm almost sure you've heard it before. The greatest girl I ever met didn't own shoes until she was 10. Raw potatoes for all of her lunches and dinners back then. Fortunately for her, the blight had been prayed away decades before. They never needed to rain dance though. Offspring oozed from Armada invaders and red-haired pagan creatures. Oliver Cromwell's petty Puritan punching bag. Known to the world for their love of the bomb and the bottle. The species, even greedy landlords, post window signs saying no thanks. The greatest girl I ever met only smoked cigarettes once. Made in China, plastic rosary beads got filled through her scrawny fingerprints. Every morning and night. Minus examination, lacking investigation, never outwardly acknowledging the flagrant confusion. The greatest girl I ever met skinned at least 1 million potatoes over those 31,000 days she lived. The greatest girl I ever met had to endure my daily count to 1,000, counting the footsteps to the indoctrination menu presented for her pleasure at St. Peter and Paul Primary School. My God of boredom takes me by the time my 7-year-old reaches 12. The greatest girl I ever met was my formative mother in the formative years, the regular mother too young for children. How typical of that age, that race, that God who loves to condemn faith. The lust for fairness, always killing my advancement. She diseased me. The lust for tough women from my senses example. The greatest girl I ever met is the best reason I can't be a proper driver. The greatest girl I ever met insisted on fairy tales. On July 5th, in the year of your Lord, 2006, mouth gaping wide open, upside down children changing her diapers, virgin men in decorated dresses buzzing around, mumbling worthless words, as usual. So slow, so pain-filled, all the dignity assembled, soaking away every solitary day. The fear in her eyes palpable to the ignorant, blissful bulk who would even dare to take a little look. Resilience sturdy by believing in things no one has ever seen. The end of the greatest girl I ever met secured my 99.99999% atheism. Who would want a friend who treats their friends like this? The passing bell still told for those who die as cattle. The best ones die slowly as Frederick Bailey. I'll die quick and easy as Frederick Douglass. My favorite girl's final lesson.
Well, seeing out the highs down here, lock the doors. Let's order some pizzas. I'm gonna take their time. I'm trying to be sweet, short. Atheism. Oh boy, this is a big word. Some people know it, some don't really know it, some have ideas about it. Originally comes from the Greek atheos, A-T-H-E-O-S, who's without God. It's a sort of purported statement about those who didn't believe in the Greek gods. Mr. Perez is not here, some of you may know Ben Perez. He's the normally the humanities teacher, much better man than myself for teaching this subject. But we had a joke the other day. He said, atheists, the best way to explain atheists is this. No one ever lies asleep, or no one ever lies in their bed at night and thinks to themselves, Zeus, is he the real God? For those who don't know, Zeus is the Greek god. Atheist is sort of a belief in no gods. That's about the only negative thing about it. The only negative, denial of something. There is no gods according to us. For us, we are beginning from what are called materialism. Materialism is the belief that the world is just fundamentally material things. The denial of any sort of transcendent or supernatural reality. So anything that exists beyond the material world that you see, wood, stone, flesh and bones. Anything beyond that, we deny as existence. Besides the Greeks, there's some debate. According to some, naturalism, which is originally a Greek philosophy, comes from what are called the Malaysian philosophers. That's M-I-L-E-S-I-A-N. A collection of them who were alive in the 6th century BCE, called Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes. Sorry to pronounce it. Now, atheism is sort of arises in what we call Western Europe in the 1700s. 1770, Baron de Holbein publishes a book called The System of Nature in 1770. He claims, or academics claim this is the very first outward public atheist book. In 1782, the first one in Britain is called The Answer to Dr. Priestley's Letters to a Philosophical Unbeliever. Although the author for this textbook is disputed, one name given is William Hammond, the other one is Matthew Turner. No one's ever made up their mind on that one. An academic by the name of James Thrower, he argues that Democritus and Lucretius, who are two ancient Greek writers who are actually sort of the first atheists, he makes arguments that their dialogues and their writings constitute a sort of foundation of the atheist belief. But this goes way back to the Greeks, and atheism itself hasn't had a per se organized tradition prior to the 1700s. Now, founders. The theme is founders, and as it's a tradition that has founders, but never sort of a founder from which we can all trace the beginnings, I decided that the best way to sort of explain some atheism is to explain my atheism, if you will. So I thought, explain my atheism, best way to explain it, go to the philosophy. My atheism is an offshoot of what we like to call a school of Marxism called praxis Marxism. Praxis is another Greek term, it's all those Greeks. Coming back to me. Praxis is a Greek term, it means practical activity. Praxis Marxists are what we sort of call a dialectical humanist Marxists. It comes from an Italian Marxist by the name of Antonio Gramsci. He was alive in 1891, died in 1937. He, being Italian, lived in Italy under Benito Mussolini. He was locked up in prison in 1926. His most famous publication is called The Prison Notebooks. It was written between the years 1929 and 1935, in which he wrote 30 notebooks worth of material and 3,000 pages of history, all of which was smuggled outside of prison while he was inside. He, though, was not the first Marxist. Marx. 1818 to 1883, he was born in Prussia, eventually lived in London. Some of his notable publications is obviously the Communist Manifesto, you've probably heard of, Das Kapital, German Ideology, the Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts of 1844, or it's otherwise known as the Paris Manuscripts. Now, praxis Marxism, what it is a ontological form of Marxism. Ontology, if you don't know, is the sort of argument about what is the base nature of humanity, or man, if you will. What is the basis of what we do? In ontology, or in this ontological Marxism, the argument is that man at his base nature is a creator. He makes things. Now he makes things in the form of both physical objects, like this podium, if you will, but he also makes ideas. Produces and builds ideas. And from there, we think of all things as being from humanity. There's a famous line from Marx in one of his early writings. It's called The Contribution to the Critique of Hegel's Philosophy of Right. This is probably the more famous line everyone's ever heard of when it comes to Marx in regards to religion. He says, religious suffering is at the same time an expression of real suffering and a protest against real suffering. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the sentiment of a heartless world, and the soul of a soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. I know, highly incendiary for some folks, I understand. This is Marx. He's kind of like that. But atheism in itself, for most of us, is just a rejection of God, rejection of religion, rejection of anything that exists beyond the material world. For myself, personally, as a praxis Marxist, atheism is also a rejection of ideas that tell us that humanity isn't the center of everything. For us, man makes ideas, therefore man is the source of all ideas, and the source of everything, if you will. The world itself, think about it, if the world ends, well, humanity ends, right? The world ended, but the world keeps going, because the world's just a rock, it's some water. It'll keep on spinning. Even if climate change manages to ruin planet for humanity and everyone dies, planet will still be here. They'll just be going around to say, this is the world. And that is atheism, if you will. Thank you for your time. It's short and sweet with the goal, I hope it is.
We're going to talk about Baha'i.
Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize, I do not know where the speaker was supposed to be here to speak on behalf of Baha'i faithfulness. So this is not planned. This is just a substitute for whatever was planned by someone else. As Ben said, my name is Carol, and I work at the Atlantic Museum, but I also am a Baha'i. Baha means, it's an Arabic word, which I'm sure all the Muslims understand. It means glory, or beauty, or light. So Baha'i means a follower of the light. And Baha'u'llah is the founder of the Baha'i faith. Baha'u'llah means in English the glory of God. In Marshallese, Ibu. So this is a title that was given to that Baha'u'llah took on when he realized that he was what Baha'is call a manifestation of God. A manifestation means one who reveals. So as a manifestation of God, we consider him one who reveals guidance from a higher source, or what is commonly known as God. In the Baha'i faith, the main teachings are the oneness of humanity, the oneness of God, which basically is accepted by all religions today. The oneness of humanity, which means that all human beings on this planet are one family. All the religions, all the former religions, teach this same teaching, but we as humans have not learned it as yet. And at this point in time, the world is in a state of confusion, some danger, mostly caused by us humans, basically almost always caused by us, and instantaneous communication, if we have internet, but also we have not learned how to get along. We have not learned how to work together. So as Baha'is, Baha'u'llah said, he came to bring unity and justice to the world, which means that we as human beings are capable of learning these qualities. We have learned them little by little through the centuries. As to the other religions of the world, Baha'is believe that religion is one. All spiritual teachings come from one source. All spiritual teachings come from one source, which is commonly called God, or Anish, or Allah, and there's many other words for God. So why are we fighting? Why are we arguing? It all comes from the same source. As Baha'is, we believe in progressive revelation, which means that from time to time, as humanity needs it, we are given further guidance from this higher source. So as Baha'is, we believe in the teachings of Krishna. We believe in the teachings of Buddha. We believe in the teachings of Abraham. We believe in the teachings of Jesus. We believe in the teachings of Muhammad. The spiritual teachings do not change. What changes is our day-to-day way of living our lives, because our lives have changed through the centuries, which is very, very obvious to all of us today. These teachings that came through Baha'u'llah, he was born in Persia, which today is called Iran. He lived from 1817 to 1892. He was born into a very wealthy family. His father had a very high position under the Shah of Iran. Shah means king, Erosh. And upon the death of his father, he was offered the same position, but he refused it. He said, no, I am here to help the poor. And he and his wife, Navad, became known as the mother and father of the poor. This is before he realized that he was the manifestation of God. Later on, he was imprisoned in a dungeon, and this is where, as he describes it, I do not have the quote available, but he describes it as a spirit of an essence coming to him that made him realize that he was to be a prophet of God or a manifestation of God. When he was released from prison, he was exiled, and for the rest of his life, he basically was a prisoner. The reason why he was a prisoner is because the Muslims in Iran wanted to stop his religion. And he was exiled to Baghdad. He was in Baghdad for 10 years. Then he was exiled to Constantinople and Adrianople, which is in Turkey today. And finally, he was exiled to Akka. Akka, at the time, was under the Ottoman Empire, which was ruled by the Sultan of Turkey, or of Ottoman Empire. And he was imprisoned in a city called Akka, which was the prison city for the Ottoman Empire. He did not choose these exiles. He was forced to flee. And he was imprisoned in the walled city of Akka, which was a city that was so horrible that tradition said that when a bird flew over the city of Akka, it never reached the other side of the town because the air was so foul. There was no water, there was no sanitation, it was a prison. And he was there for many, many years, and finally was allowed to leave the prison city and live just outside a few miles from Akka, where he passed away and where he is buried today. Akka today and Haifa, which is the world center of the Baha'i faith on Mount Carmel, which is in the Bible, which is in the Quran, is in Haifa, which is now part of Israel. At the time, of course, it was part of Palestine, when Baha'u'llah lived. The main teachings of the Baha'i faith, as I said, is the oneness of God, the oneness of humanity, and the oneness of religion. And if we think about these three principles, particularly the oneness of humanity and the oneness of religion, at least to me personally, it gives me glimmerings of how we as human beings can come together and work together in unity, in diversity. We're different, we're unique, we have different ideas, we have different potentialities, we have different capabilities. But we as humans have the ability to work together, to stop war, to stop injustices, to stop anything that is negative. But it doesn't happen overnight. This is an organic process that from generation to generation, hopefully maybe we can improve. If we look at the teachings of former religions, the teachings were given in a way that people can understand for that day. The teachings from the Baha'i faith are very direct, are very clear. There are over 100 books that Baha'u'llah wrote. Not all of them have been translated, but many of them have been. And he wrote these directly. So we have verification of who actually wrote these books. The other main teachings of the Baha'i faith is, as principles, foundational principles of the faith, the oneness of of women and men, that women have the same capabilities and potential as men, and that these have to be developed. Man has been in the force in the past, but the qualities of women are very essential in order for humanity to move forward. Such qualities as gentleness, tenderness, compassion. Men have these qualities too, but they are qualities that have been central to women forever. Another is the unity of science and religion. Oftentimes we see science and religion as conflicting. But as we understand spiritual teachings and understand scientific truths, we find that there are similarities, that they are coming together. But we as human beings are still learning this. Another one is independent search for truth. This is foundational. Each person has to find within themselves what is true for them. We don't just follow what our parents believe. We don't just follow what our friends believe, or our children, or our grandchildren. We search within ourselves to find what is true for us. Some of the other speakers mentioned this earlier. One of the most important teachings is the elimination of all prejudices. All human beings, we all have prejudices. They may be very deep inside of us. We may not even realize what they are. But if we search, we will find them. And the only way we can eliminate prejudices is to understand what our own prejudices are, and then try to overcome them. This is a constant struggle. This is a constant effort. Another is universal education. Some of these principles seem, of course, why not? This is how it should be. But these principles were stated in the mid-1800s. Long before women, particularly in a place like Persia, had any value. Long before education was available. Universal education now is considered the standard throughout the world. But this has been a process over the last 150 years of trying to provide at least some education for every child, particularly the girl child. In the Baha'i teachings, if a family has to choose, if they cannot afford to educate all their children, they are guided to educate the girl child first. The reason for this is because the girl is the future first educator of the next generation. So now the United Nations, every international organization on the planet now is emphasizing this principle, that girls have to be educated, that they are the foundation of the family's future. And this was again stated in the 1870s, long before the education of girls was basically even thought of in most places. Another is spiritual solutions to the economic problems. We don't know what those solutions are, but if they're based on foundational spiritual principles, then we as humans can find those solutions. If they're based on justice, if they're based on equality, if they're based on equity, we as humans can figure out solutions gradually. to the vast discrepancies, the vast inequities that exist on the planet today. A universal auxiliary language, this is another principle, which is referring to the fact that we have our own language. In Marshals, we have Marshallese, but we also need an international language that we all speak, so we don't lose meaning, we don't lose misunderstanding, we don't have misunderstanding in using other languages. And that world peace, or universal peace, will be upheld by a form of a commonwealth of nations, that there will be a guiding, overriding government of some sort on an international level that all countries will abide by. How this will come about, none of us know completely. But this is the future. These are things that I think as all of us living on Earth today in 2015 can see and understand the need for these principles. In a couple of statements by Baha'u'llah, the Earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. The Earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. To me, that makes more sense than just about anything. And these are based on universal spiritual principles. I'd like to close with just a little quotation from Baha'u'llah. He says, "Be generous in prosperity and thankful in adversity. Be worthy of the trust of thy neighbor, and look upon him with a bright and friendly face. Be a treasure to the poor, an admonisher to the rich, an answerer of the cry of the needy, a preserver of the sanctity of thy pledge. Be fair in thy judgment, and guarded in thy speech. Be unjust to no man, and show all meekness to all. Be as a lamp unto them that walk in darkness, a joy to the sorrowful, and a seed for the thirsty, a haven for the distressed, an upholder and defender of the victim of oppression. And let integrity and uprightness distinguish all thine acts. Be a home for the stranger, a balm to the suffering, a tower of strength for the fugitive. Be eyes to the blind, and a guiding light unto the feet of the erring. Be an ornament to the countenance of truth, a crown to the brow of fidelity, a pillar of the temple of righteousness, a breath of life to the body of mankind, an ensign of the hosts of justice, a luminary above the horizon of virtue, a dew to the soil of the human heart, an ark on the ocean of knowledge, a sun in the heaven of bounty, a gem on the diadem of wisdom, a shining light in the firmament of thy generation, a fruit upon the tree of humility. Thank you.
So earlier, or people,
capitalism is nothing for them. For them, store and their gold, they are the same. They don't hold. They know that everything is a transient. So the capitalism is something the mid-level, and it's something because they got the mixture of good qualities, but the mixture of sensuous desires also. But the lower strata of the people, capitalism, everything. They want to hold. They think that is the main purpose of the living. We are born for the capitalism. We want to grab as much as possible. Accumulate. Capitalism comes from the word capital, accumulation. So they have got the desire to accumulate the capital, thinking that they are living forever. And they know no one is going to live forever. So once a person is gone, we all come without anything. We all live living behind. So capitalism for the most lower level, least is they are ignorant. And these type of people should surrender to God and read all the, I think, read all the scriptures.
I just maybe pass it down.
Oh.
Yeah, we'll just,
If I speak about capitalism, I won't stop. I will speak about economics, though. The Buddhist teachings do speak directly into the economic realm. And it's very simple. It's really based upon a small land movement, small areas based upon goods and services and products produced locally and given locally and traded and in such a way, and not at all in this global economy that is going on today, but at a very small scale. Once again, Buddha always teaches the middle path. Too much is excess, and not enough is basic suffering. And so we want to have enough for everybody, and to do so, it's very easy to do so in small community acts.
I think this is a little bit difficult to answer in a more broad sense as a Christian. I think I can only answer as a Catholic, and as a Catholic who's worked in Latin America and has a lot of experience with liberation theology, which tends to come from more of a Marxist basis. And I think actually the Pope has spoken out recently against this and decried capitalism in the way it has been expressed in the world today as something, a source of some amount of certainly oppression, that it tends to set up false systems that we can't trust, and it leads to oppression. So I think that is what we should be wary of when we're dealing with this, is that there's nothing wrong with businesses and money and things like that. It's noble, it's a calling like any other, according to the Pope when he was in America. He said this. But when it leads to oppression, it's something that we have to intervene with, because oppression and oppressing people is something that we can't abide. So that would be my answer.
Restrict its followers to certain type of system, and that is the only way. Islam is a universal religion, and anything that is reasonable, economically or otherwise for the welfare of the people, that is allowed and that is encouraged. Interest is something that would be talked about forever. But one simple thing that I could recall is that Islam, the Holy Prophet, in one of the sayings, he said that you should give the salary of the person, of the laborer, before even his sweat dries, meaning you should not hold his salary over his pay. I don't see any reason why it should be broken. So if it is, or we should tell.
I said 2 years, couple grandson rounds, two comments. One, obviously Marx is writing against capitalism. A lot of his writings deal with capitalism. A lot of his writings are meant to sort of unveil the structural inequalities of capitalism. But he even expresses sort of admiration of it at times. He's had a couple comments where he's even said, like, capitalism is pretty strong. It managed to undo and perform a sort of a revolution of social classes in England, France, and Germany in a time frame that was unseen until that moment. So, on the one hand, he sort of like recognizes that it's pretty strong. It's a very driving belief system or ideology. And on the one hand, we look at it good and bad. Capitalism and globalization, to an extent, has opened up information, and information flows across borders now in more ways than we could have ever seen even 100 years ago. But at the same time, it also creates very severe structural inequalities. poverty becomes an aspect of it. Poverty that is starvation, poverty of political, people are losing out on say, land rights in India to multinational corporations. As an atheist, we don't see, if you will, a transcendental or supernatural nature that we should turn to in order to fight these problems. For ourselves, we see these problems as man-made, and there we have to undo them through man-made methods. I mean, in this way, capitalism is a man-made object, man-made idea. From there, we have to come up with man-made ideas to try and undo those problems. Whereas atheists, other atheists would say, like, if you turn to a sort of supernatural reality, they would argue that that's not going to achieve the results you want. Capitalism is a pretty monolithic thing right now. That's not going to get done in the next 5 years. It's going to require quite a lot of willpower if we're going to create a sort of redistribution of capitalism. You okay? So yeah, that's short answer.
As for the Baha'i thing, we again don't talk about any particular political agenda, but the writings in the Baha'i thing are full of comments about the excessive materialism that exists in the world, and that we are to live our lives in moderation in all things, and that capitalism has gone way overboard because it's gone beyond injustice in the same way that other types of political systems have gone beyond equity and justice.
Okay. We've got a few friends. There's part.
People have distorted the concept of living. Technology and politics have made it, it has divided each works and word, because God's original teaching is not to be questioned or researched. But as a technology politics, everyone is asking and doubting their words of God, and they themselves try to become the end of the God by their own ideas. So definitely the original principles have been forgotten, and a lot of options have taken place. So that is what has happened in Hinduism. And slowly, as God says, whenever the morality goes down, He sends someone to uplift the morals so that the pure form will come out, like the reincarnation of somebody. So we are also waiting for that somebody to come and bring the new order to the religion which has been created from the original philosophy. Thank you.
I believe I already spoke to this. I personally don't consider myself a Buddhist. However, I follow very regularly and very faithfully many teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha was against rites and rituals, and codification in general. He wrote nothing. His scribe, Ananda, he did not hire Ananda. He did not ask him to come write down every single speech that he gave, but that's what Ananda did. And it's through the interpretations of his speeches that once again were culturally and geographically and chronologically significant that have been distorted. And so I would say even during his time, Buddha wouldn't have called himself a Buddhist.
This is a question, if I missed it, was how do the founders, prophets of each religion reflect their teachings and their practice by current believers and the faithful? I think that's It's a tough question, I think, for anybody to answer because it's hard for us to know the mind of a founder of our religion. But I think that you could come back and look and see that there is a lot of drift, as there is going to be any time you're carrying a message over 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. It could be like a game of telephone where you whisper something into somebody's ear and they take the message and they pass it down and they pass it down and they pass it down and they pass it down. Things get distorted and they get lost. I think there would always be some need to issue a kind of corrective to change some interpretations sometimes that have gotten out of line. So I think certainly if our original founder were to come back, he might have some words for us to help us correct and get back in line, certainly.
So the reality is that with the passage of time, there are higher chances of the original message being distorted. And this was also understood by the Prophet and blessing of God. This is why he gave the glad tidings that at the end of every century, God will raise, as Muslims call it, Mujaddid, or the one who would renew the faith. And then on top of that, he gave another glad tidings of the Messiah, or the promised Messiah who was supposed to come and revive the faith back to its original positions. Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, to which I am a proud member of, believes that Messiah was our founder, Mirza Ghulam Ahmed, who claimed to be the same person who was prophesied by the Prophet Muhammad that he would appear in the latter days and he will revive the original teachings of Islam. What are the original teachings of Islam? Number one, Islam has the word Islam means peace and submission to the will of God. And especially in relation to the question that he asked, that how does it reflect on today's followers? Unfortunately, there are various groups in Muslims, but you know what Ahmed, our founder, brought, he said that Islam is a religion of peace. It has no room for violence whatsoever. Jihad is what that occurred, as I explained in my presentation, was only a defensive one, and that was only for that time of the Prophet. And it does not is not valid in this today's time of day. So therefore, he avoided jihad or any kind of violence related to the religion. Even in defensive, Ahmadiyya Muslims believe that we should not even retaliate. We simply just migrate to another place. And this has been our practice, and we have proven it through our actions for over 100 some years already. We just migrate from that place to another place, and this is what the Holy Quran says, that God has made this land very vast. And you can go to another place where you can do peacefully. There is no room for a Muslim to create any kind of disorder where he is in his country or in his city or in his home.
Well, it's part of my, so here atheism, there isn't a founder, distinction, practices, teachings. It's just at its root, it's just one simple premise: rejection of any sort of supernatural transcendent reality. Here materialism, the naturalism of God. To the latter half of my presentation of my personal atheism, that school, there's, even inside of Marxism, there's different schools of thought. They do evolve, yes. In fact, being a philosophical school, logic, reason improves, you come up with new argumentation, so that evolution is actually something that's desired in our field. We want to be constantly refining our rationality when it comes to certain topics or issues. So there's no sort of, if you will, appeal to tradition, returning back to the source. For us, it's a consistent evolution in logic or rationality. A common example I would give of this sort of evolution is like the advancement in the what's known as the problem of evil argument. I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of this, the philosophy of the problem of evil, which is that It goes like this. It's a simple logical proposition. The problem with evil works like this. If God is all good, all knowing, and all powerful, therefore God knows about evil. God is a good person, is against evil. God is all powerful, is capable of destroying evil. But because evil exists in the world, therefore there's no God. Right? That's just a logical proposition for what the problem of evil is. And there's been a very long story debate as to how to respond to that problem. And that debate itself is very rich. If you ever are interested, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is a very succinct breakdown of that history. But for us, the question is evolution of the religion. Yes, for us, evolution of what is atheism is important because we're working from rationality. We want to constantly be redefining our thoughts. I hope that answers the questions that were asked.
Since I mentioned before the Baha'is believe in progressive revelation, then this is how we see religion. That from time to time, as humanity needs it, a new messenger or a new teacher from God is given to us. And in the Baha'i writings, we are told that not before 1,000 years, there will be, at some point in time, at least after 1,000 years, there will be new teachings, new guidance that humanity needs at that time. So, as to the followers of the Baha'i faith, this is variable. It depends on the followers. I think all religions have certain laws and rules and guidance, even though the spiritual teachings, as I mentioned before, are fundamentally the same. Then it's up to the individual to decide how they live their life in respect to their own beliefs or their own understanding of possibly the religion that they say they are following or trying to follow. So this is the responsibility of each person. It's not the responsibility of the religion. Each person studies a religion, studies teaching, studies philosophy, studies whatever is of interest or makes sense to them, and then they decide from there what that means to them and how they are going to live their life according to what they have read or studied or believed. The messengers of God, with these teachings, do help guide us.
Okay, this is, I still want to have a follow-up question. I'm sorry, follow-up answer.
One point is what the Congress will think of present. In the other point, it's mentioned that government will decide on discuss to 10 times to eradicate the ignorance application. So up to now, since the creation of this universe, maybe 15 billion years, God has decided for Hindus, God has decided 9 times. And last time he was on earth was 5,500 years ago. The culture, the deterioration was so much that the brothers' wives were molested by the other brothers. Women said gambling points in their money. They would utilize the wives as a point to gamble. So that was the time God came and they restored the order. Now, again, only 5,005 years, still we have deteriorated. Another we are all waiting another 2,000 years. There will be intervention of God to restore the order, or we may destroy the universe. That is our Hindu belief.
Okay. Nadeem, you could read out the question.
Yes. The question that was presented to me in the card is, what is the purpose of our life? I know you can do good things in this world without believing in God, but what will happen when you die? There must be some reason or purpose. Fantastic question. Very fantastic question. And very well written, too. Sorry, I'm a writing teacher, so I always pay attention to writings. Good question. What is the purpose of our life? Well, what do you want the purpose of your life? I mean, if fundamentally man is what I come from as a praxis Marxist, if we make things, if we make ideas, then the purpose of our lives is the thing that we decide. This is the purpose of our life. And the reason why I want to respond to this question is because this is actually something I've been contemplating myself since I've moved here to Marshall Island. What is the purpose of my life? What do I want to achieve? What are the things that I want to do? And in the last year, I must say, this has become sort of the new thing. The purpose of my life is I subscribe to the house of Canoblock. Family. Like for me, it's family. Having now lived 6,000 miles away from my family, not having been able to see them for the last 14 months, like it sinks in now how important family is. And family is a human relationship. It's a relationship we have that's built on sort of values, emotions, virtues, shared memories, experiences. You can get purpose in this instance from human relationships. Now, as to the question of what will happen when you die, I have a fellow friend who's also an atheist. One time I asked him, and he said, I believe when you die, you're on the ground. It was more funny when he said it, but that's kind of what it is. It's just that while we're alive, we think we're sort of, if you will, it's a trick of the mind because the chemicals, the electrical activity in our brains makes us feel as if we are somehow special. This is a Nietzschean idea too. That the biggest sort of secret or con is that the human being thinks he's more special than the others. And then we fear our deaths because we're kind of conscious of our deaths. Yeah, I think that answers the question. Unless if it doesn't, the person who wrote this, if you want to follow up, then I'll use.
That question was directed to Nick, but if anyone else feels compelled to add to that, in your perspective,
Utilize the eyes of the people, the purpose of utilizing the mind of senses of individual souls. Now, it's up to the person. According to Hinduism, we are all born to go back to Vaikuntha, not to heaven. Vaikuntha, we should go back without any desires of the heart or in the normal. That is the purpose of the life of Hindus.
I can just briefly say that what you put on classes from Master Krishna was inside that I have not created the thing and the thing, but that they will worship me. So we believe as a mission that the purpose of our life is so that we can be obedient and abiding of the commandments of God the Almighty, and we can worship God the Almighty. So this is the purpose for it.
The purpose of life is a high faith and is also the worship of God, but it's also service to humanity. Our goal in life is to serve others.